A common question that I receive is how to use the Spiro mode in FontForge. A lot of my fellow developers don't even know how to use it. It was added, I believe, in 2012 by Mr. Ralph Levian. He is the one that originally wrote the Spiro library, and then George Williams added it. It could have been a few years prior. It could even be 2008. But it was somewhere around there. And it is still one of the best drawing tools in FontForge. So I will just show myself drawing some glyphs here to show how it's used, and I'll just give some commentary. So basically there are multiple types, and I'll bring up the magnifier to make this easier to see. There are multiple types of node that you can use in Spiro. You have the next constraint point and the previous constraint point. And you just use these when you want a line to turn into a curve. And I'll demonstrate that shortly. You have what they call a G2 curve point, which is really, you know, I don't understand all the math stuff. And anybody who's worked with me on FontForge knows that math stuff is not my strong suit. But it's some kind of derivative or something. Anyway, what I would say is the diamond shape, the G2 curve, is just a softer curve than the G4 curve, which is the round shape, and it's just called a curve in FontForge. Alright, so those are the types, and of course there's a corner, which just makes straight lines. So, of course, the easiest thing to draw in Spiro is a C. And really all you have to do is just place down points. We will use the softer curve for this, the G2. And you just stick points around the shape like this. Generally, you'll see I'm doing it in like a certain pattern. You don't want to put too many points, but you also don't want to put too few. There is definitely an art to using the Spiro tool. I've used the Spiro tool for almost all of my fonts. Only my earliest work isn't using it. My earliest work when I was still using Illustrator. But all of my recent work is using the Spiro tool, so it's very important to me that it works well, and I've patched several bugs with it. So, alright. We've drawn our C here, and we will just use a... We'll just give it a real quick, stroke. Kind of, a rectangular stroke that's mimicking a calligraphy pen. I am using an experimental stroker right now. This is not part of the latest FontForge release, but it will be hopefully in the next release, and if not, the release after that. So stay tuned for that. I also have a video on our Twitter showing the different options of this. So that looks pretty good. I think I'm gonna check these two so that it'll be easier to interpolate this resulting spline. So we'll click OK here, and you'll notice that there's a lot of points. Sometimes this freaks people out who are using Spiro. Don't worry about it. If I hit 0 and go back to the Bezier mode, you'll see that it looks totally fine. The reason that there are so many points is because George Williams, there is no real way to convert a Bezier spline into a spiral spline. So he kind of made kind of like a fake way of doing that. And I can very easily show you that it's fake and that it's just a poor approximation by using an oval. So here's an oval drawn in Bezier mode. And if we flip over to Spiro and we mess with one of these points, you can see that the shape just changed. See that? Even though I didn't really move the point, you can see our shape has Hold on, this isn't really the best example. For example, let's draw something like this, right? And now it's very obvious, see? That this is just a poor approximation of a, yeah. So, there's really nothing else to say about it. So don't get freaked out about all these points. I would recommend, you know, not moving them after you've used the stroker. What you should really do, and what I tend to do in my fonts, is I will keep my spirals in another layer in case I want to make another stroke. So I'll stick that in a layer called spirals, and then over here in the 4 layer, that's where I'll put my my stroke spline. Okay, so let's draw another letter. This is a little bit more of a difficult letter, the letter D. And the reason that it's more difficult is because we have a straight line turning into a curve and then turning back into a straight line. Luckily, Spiro is very good for that. So what we want is the previous and the next constraints. Now, sometimes it's hard to remember which one to use, and I make the mistake all the time of pressing the wrong one. So luckily, if we hit the wrong one, it's no big deal. And just for demonstration purposes, I'll hit the wrong one. Right, and then we'll put this here, and then, oh no, you can see it's treating this as the straight line and that as the curve, when we wanted this to be the straight line and that to be the curve. So all we have to do, this might not work if you don't have the latest FontForge release. I fixed it in, I believe, 2 releases ago, maybe 1 release ago, but I know a lot of Linux distributions are behind. So if these are not coming up right here, where you can just very quickly just press right constraint and get your correct constraint back, you can go to get info and you can do the same thing. So yeah, okay, but luckily I'm using a developer version which is ahead of the latest release, so I can use the right click menu with no problems. We'll move this back until it starts to look good, and then we will get the other kind. So this is the, it is the next constraint, so we want the previous constraint, which just looks like this little bracket here. And then we will just connect it to the corner. There we go. Now, okay, you'll see it looks a little bit ugly. That's because you can see the straight line really affects the curve. And just by moving that, you can see how it corrects itself. And messing with this, you know, little changes in spiral make a big difference. And that's why I like it so much, because the curves, they look so much better than anything I could produce with the Bezier tool. We might want to put a little, you know, actually we might want to use a G2 there. Yeah, see that slight change? Let me repeat it. It's a very slight change between the G2 and the G4. So, you know, it's really up to you and your eye which one you prefer. But, yep. And I'm just going to drag this out a little bit. Alright. So now, let's copy this and stick it in the spirals layer. And then let's do our stroker. And I think we're going to want to go with 25. There we go. Wow, look at that. Okay. Now our stroker, hopefully it's going to get miter joins for that area. So I'm looking forward to that. And we can see, whoops, we can see here, wow, those look pretty good. We might want to go with thicker strokes. Luckily, we have our spirals in case we want to go back. But, yeah, we have our spirals here. So, yeah. Alright, so let's draw an S. And the S is where the spiral really shines. The next letters I draw will all be difficult. I'll draw an S, I'll draw the ampersand, and I'll draw my favorite letter, the Q. And I think we'll end on the Q. So why don't we go to the S? And the S is always quite tricky to draw. it's certainly the trickiest letter. So let's get our constraints here and see what we can do. There we go. And hopefully you can see the shape of it, so if you're trying to follow along, you can see basically what it is that I'm doing and why. Now the great thing, and I didn't really mention this, when you have two constraints together, it sort of creates a straight line in the middle. But it's not really exactly a straight line, if you see. So that creates a really good effect when you're drawing, for example, a letter S. And, you know, that looks pretty good to me. Now, if you're doing this, if you're trying to follow along, feel free to, you know, pause the video and go back. I've been doing this for years, and I've made many, many, many fonts using the Spiro tool. So, yeah. Alright, you can see our experimental stroker. It's got some, a little bit ugly around that edge right there. But, no problem. We can go back in the traditional stroker, or, I'm sure we'll fix that by the next release. But you can see it's actually a quite good result, and very close to the original. And if I was using the, traditional stroker, it would be fine. You know, and I might even fire it up at the end here and show that. Probably not, though. Alright, so let's draw the ampersand. This is, of course, the most difficult, like, letter in most fonts. This one seems quite forgiving. We see we have some corners here and like a 3 shape, so this is always quite interesting. So let's see what we can do. There we go. And we're just gonna... So if you see what I do here, and where I place them, right? Because it's real important where you place the points. I try not to put too many. I try to put one... If you think about a circle, right? I will try to... Let's draw a circle and see if it's actually right. No, it isn't. It's too many points. So let's make a circle. Why don't we do that? Let me make a circle, and maybe that'll help you understand. So, when I'm drawing this circle here, you can see the places I tend to put points, right? Okay. I tend to put either 6 and sometimes 8. And of course, this is a silly little circle. You know, I can easily go into get info and measure it and make a perfect circle. But that's not the point of this. It's just showing how we can get all kinds of interesting shapes from the Spiro tool. So, yeah, I tend to put 6 or 8 points in an approximation of a circle, just depending on what's needed. And, you know, as you do this, you get a good eye for what's needed and what points you really need to create like a backbone for your letter. Alright. So let me continue our ampersand here. We need one there and one there. One there. And I think we'll just put a corner here and finish it like that. Is that gonna be sufficient? It might not be. Okay, what we probably want to do is put a constraint here. Yeah, there we go. To keep it straight as it's entering the final point here. And you can see we're starting to get little kinks in the spiral, but I can fix that by drawing it, and yeah, there we go, making it a more rounder. And we might even want to drag that back or forwards a little bit, and of course keep it level. Alright, there we go. You know, that looks pretty good to me, so why don't we take a look at what our Spiro spline looks like. Yeah, you know, it's not the best, and it might just be that, this particular shape is going to require post-processing, which happens. It's normal, you know. When you're drawing with a calligraphy pen, you can change your, for example, your nib angle while you're drawing, but that's something that our stroker, at least not yet, at least it can't do that yet. So that's probably the best approximation we're going to get. me try. Yeah, that looks, we might want to go into Bezier mode here and fix it up a little bit, but I'm trying to show how to use the spiral, so I won't do that right now. But you can see, we get a pretty good approximation just from drawing that spiral outline and using our stroker. And okay, so I've done the S, the ampersand, and then I'm going to do the Q. And you know what? I do think I'll go through and use the legacy stroker to show how this would look in Master FontForge. So, okay. So the Q is personally my favorite letter. I think all people who make fonts have a favorite letter. I would be shocked if, you didn't. But if you don't, that's fine, you are just an anomaly, I suppose. I forgot to copy our spine here into the spirals layer. Alright, so, actually we might just want to keep that as an ellipse. So why don't we look at what that looks like as just an ellipse. Wow, pretty good. So let's just accept that. Of course, let's copy it into our spirals layer. And let's just accept that. The tail of this Q is again, just a straight line that's turning into a curved line. So let's just grab our constraint and grab a few curve points and oh yes, there you go. That's it. And the more you do it, the better you get at it, and you can crank these out real fast once you get a handle for the spiral tool and what it's expecting and all that kind of thing. Alright, I'm thinking, let's see. Okay, that does help. Alright, so let me stroke this one, copy it into the spirals layer, and stroke it 40. It looks like it should be thinner around here. So why don't I try decreasing the minor height to 1? Does that really help? Yeah, there's a kink in the... Yeah, that might just be due to our experimental stroker here. So why don't we just leave it at 10 for now? And just take a look. Oh, so that happens sometimes, especially when you're drawing with the spiral tool. It's just a directionality problem. It is thinking that this is supposed to be a hole punched into this one, but because it overflows the bounds, that's why it looks like this. And this can be a cool effect in some fonts, but it's not what we're looking for here. So we can just click that and then element clockwise. And there we go. Alright, so I've stroked a bunch of letters here. And for our final test, why don't we take a look at it with the regular with the so-called legacy stroker, i.e. the one that's in the current release. So let me close this, and I will run FontForge on the file that we just had open. And hopefully this one has the legacy stroker. Let me check. Yes, it does. You can see because it says polygon, not convex. Okay, so why don't we take a look what some of these look like with the legacy stroker, just to see. Let's take Spiros and copy these and put them in the 4 and 120, 10. By the way, for the next release, I plan to make it so that the expand stroke dialog options are saved in the SFD file. So, okay. So we can see immediately we get that's a much better result, to be honest. The reason we're replacing the stroker, though, is it has a lot of bugs, and I have full confidence in the new stroker that it will be much better, especially for circular drawing. first, because there are a lot of bugs in the circle tool in the other stroker. So it's still, you know, in alpha testing, and I'm sure the guy who's making it will take a look at this video. Well, maybe I shouldn't be so sure, but this is just some good feedback for him. Alright. Why don't we take a look at the ampersand? Why don't we compare, okay? Let's drag this over. And why don't we take our spiros here and just see what they look like with the legacy as compared to... And did I do 45? I think I did 40. That's always the thing when you're... see? There we go. That's why we're replacing the stroker. You see how this turned pink? That means that it's an open path. Like I said, there are tons of bugs in this stroker, in the legacy stroker, and watch. A 0.1 change fixed that. So there's a little tip for you guys who are still stuck with the legacy stroker. Sometimes 0.1 will help, and you'll see that error is from the previous run that I did. Okay, you know, those look pretty much identical. You can see that there are always some issues around this area, that area. But actually, you know, the new stroker, to me, except up here, looks a bit better. So, yeah. And for our final one, why don't we take a look at the S? I saw, you know, a few problems with the S, especially around here and around there. So that'll be our final comparison. I hope you guys got something out of this video. I hope you know, learned a little bit about the Spiro tool. This is kind of just addendum here. Let's see, 45. And okay. And compare. Okay, so in this case, the legacy stroker is still slightly better. You can see there's this area is much better in the legacy stroker. However, I do know that the solver is being worked on right as we speak, and I think that will all change very soon. And you can see here are our letters. I don't know if I'll finish this font. I might. Do you guys think it would be interesting to have an open source Lydian typeface clone? I don't know. Let me know what you think, and I hope you got something out of this, and happy font founding, and God bless you. Thank you very much.